This was a topic I didn't plan on covering today, and it's a reason why I haven't had a new episode up on the podcast in a while. I had a dear friend take his life 2 weeks ago. It's not something that any of us expected, although in a lot of ways I'm not totally surprised, and I'm not really going to go into his life and his journey because that's not for me to discuss. What I really want to talk about here is how we, people like myself, his friends, his family, or any of us, navigate this path of grief. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I feel like our society does not talk about enough. In fact, we all like to forget about it, yet we all experience it. And I've had more clients and dealt with more friends, family, you name it, TBI survivors who really struggle with grief and don't know how to handle the yuck feelings that we all feel that come with it. And that's a part of life. And so that's why I wanted to do this podcast today, was to really hopefully give you some foundational grounding and maybe shift your idea of grief in a little way to make it less scary, less overwhelming. I don't know, but we're going to try. So bear with me on this one. It's been a tough 2 weeks. But this is life, and it's all something we go through. So I really wanted to connect with you guys on this level. So let's dive in and really talk about understanding grief beyond the norm, right? And I think the biggest thing that really affects us when we're talking about grief is your culture, how you were brought up, what do you believe, the community around you. All of that really sets the tone for how we deal with death and grief. And I know in the United States, we don't really talk about it. I mean, we really don't. It's not something that our culture really has a practice around like other cultures. As you journey through grief, I think it's important to recognize that the way we mourn is deeply influenced by this. It's deeply influenced by the way we were raised and what we were taught. It's deeply influenced by our cultural backgrounds. Across the globe, there's various cultures that have rich traditions that offer solace and meaning, and in the face of loss, they know how to handle it. Take, for instance, the vibrant celebration of the Day of the Dead, right? In Mexico. And for those of you that don't know, the Day of the Dead, this is an annual tradition known as Dia de la Muertes. Excuse me for my Spanish. It's a colorful and joyous commemoration of loved ones who have passed away. Families gather to create elaborate altars adored with photos and flowers and offerings honoring the memory of their ancestors. Through music, dance, and storytelling, they believe they can maintain a spiritual connection with their loved ones who have departed on the other side and still feel like their spirits are here with them, alive in their hearts and in their daily lives. And then you can go and look in China. I'm not even going to begin to describe what it's called. I think it's the Qingming festival. Apologies. Also known as a tomb sweeping day. And it's time for families to pay their respects to their ancestors. Similar to Mexico, they visit the grave sites, they clean the tombstones, and they offer food and, paper replicas of material goods as gifts to the deceased. It's deeply rooted tradition that fosters a sense of depth and connection between the living and the dead. It's a ceremony. It's sacred for both of these cultures. It's reinforcing family bonds across generations where no one is forgotten and they're forever together in a way. So I want you to think about that, because in the United States, we really don't have these traditions. And some of us do, but it's rare. And unless you see these cultures that move over here and kind of bring their traditions and introduce them, here in America, I think it's just that part of life we don't talk about. So I want you to lean into this idea of what kind of practice could you make, what kind of ceremony when you're grieving to honor your grief, honor the person that you've lost, honor your family, your friends. I know that's something I've really thought about this week in dealing with my grief and loss of a friend, and thinking I can focus on all the whys. I can focus on all the negatives, but that's not going to change the fact that my friend's gone. Instead, why don't I try to focus on how I can now continue to honor him? How could I continue to honor his spirit? How could I honor the good times we had? How could I honor how I'm feeling? And I think I don't want you to get it twisted, right? I don't want you to think that I'm saying don't be sad or don't even be angry, because that's all stages of grief, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, how can you honor how you're feeling, but also honor in a new way the loss that you've had? And this can be a pivot, just like I've shared with those cultures that, they're grown up with that. They're raised with that. So to them, that's what they do when someone passes. It's not foreign. But for us here in the States, we're not raised with that. The most we have is a wake, and then you go to the funeral, and then maybe a breakfast or a lunch, and it's pretty somber. But there's not this, I don't know, there's not this ceremony of connection. It's so much more like a disconnect almost. So, a bond culturally is fantastic, but I think if we don't have that, then we can start to turn to spirituality, right? Spirituality can be this guiding light in your darkness. It can offer you comfort and hope for those of us who mourn. Many faiths provide a framework for grieving and for death, for understanding it and what the afterlife means. And that can bring some solace to how you're feeling in a loss. And that depends on what your beliefs are. Consider the perspectives of those who believe in reincarnation. And for instance, in Hinduism and Buddhism, death is seen as a transition. It's not the end. It's just I transform from one life form to another, and the soul continues on. And it's on a new journey. So they don't see death as ending so much as just a transition. And this can bring reassurance to people of the loved ones, or, to understand to yourself that this person isn't really gone and they've just embarked on a new adventure and we'll meet each other again. And I tend to believe in that. That's my belief. And that's why I think I can deal with this passing a little bit easier. I've seen a lot of death. I've been around it enough. I'm old enough, is my point, to know and kind of navigate through, what is death and what does it mean to me? And I believe his soul transitioned. And even though he chose his soul's ending, I trust that that was the path for him. Now, I want to put this out there. I'm not condoning this in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that this is a way to leave this planet. What I'm saying is I have to navigate my own grief in this and understand to the best of my ability how to honor him. I will never understand totally because I wasn't him. But I have been in my own dark places to know what that feels like. And I'll share something I've never really shared publicly. My closest friends know. But when I had my brain injury after it, I went through a very dark time. And very dark. Thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And if this is how I was meant to live, I wish I hadn't survived my injury. And at the time, you're trying to navigate a lot. So it just was, it almost felt too much for one human to bear. And I ended up seeking out therapy, and I went to EMDR therapy. And I told my therapist, listen, I have a problem. I don't want to take my own life, but I'm okay if I go outside and something happens to me. And she just looked at me and said, okay, so you're passively suicidal. And I said, I don't know what that means. And she said, you don't want to take your own life, but you're okay if something else does. And I said, correct. And I know that's not healthy and that's a problem. And I don't know how to get out of this dark hole. And it was tough. It was really tough. And she said to me, okay. And I said, I feel like I'm literally treading water, barely keeping my head above water. And I'm going to drown if I stop treading. And one of the most profound things she said to me was, so drown. And I remember looking at her in shock. Like, if I stop doing what I'm doing, if I stop whatever, how I'm hanging on, I'm not going to come out of this dark hole. And she had shared with me, she's like, I'm not going to let you go there. You're not going to be in a place where you're not going to be able to get out of it. I promise you that. But you are living in survival mode. And you can't live there. That's not where we are meant to live. So I remember breaking down and literally just sobbing and feeling like two things. Somebody finally understood me, right? Somebody got what I was saying, and somebody saw me in that moment and was there for me, because I felt like I had nowhere else to turn and nobody was understanding me. And that's one of the things that led me to go get therapy. So I just want to share that because I think it's important to understand that asking for help when you are at your darkest, when you feel like there's nobody, when you feel like I don't know what to do and I know this isn't a healthy place for me to be, I sought that person out. Like, I sought them. I'm like, I'm going to find a therapist. And I didn't have money at the time. So I've had people hand me a lot of reasons why they can't do something. But at the end of the day, those are really all just excuses of not taking the step forward to find help. And I know it can be frustrating. Trust me, I'm not putting that down at all. It was frustrating, but I also know how the universe works. And I also know how things are brought to you exactly when you need them, as long as you're open to them. And she was one of those people, and she forever changed my life. I ended up doing therapy and EMDR therapy for over a year. And I also went on antidepressant meds for about 6 months just to help me through it. So I get it. Grief can feel heavy. It can feel like this cloak of just darkness that sometimes you don't know how you're going to navigate out of it. But I promise you, there's a way out of it. And I wish my friend could have known that. But again, it's, everybody's journey is different. And so sharing that story with you, and I just wanted you to understand me a little bit better and know where I'm coming from and why I have the, these insights that I do. And you can agree or disagree. That's fine. I'm not trying to convince everybody. I just wanted to share something because I know this is something we're all touched with. And so what I really would like to do is talk about, more importantly, ways that you can process your grief, healthy ways. I know I just shared, obviously, go get a therapist. Any therapist. I did EMDR therapy, whatever works for you. And I will tell you this, that sometimes I got lucky, but most of the time, the first therapist you meet is not necessarily the therapist you're going to work with. Sometimes it's going to take you going to 1, 2, or 3 to find somebody who really works with you in that way. And I don't care if it's a therapist. I don't care if it's a counselor. I don't care if you go to your pastor, if that's better for you. I don't care who it is, just as long as you reach out. I also want to put out there, I was also in a support group for brain injury survivors. So I also made sure I had support around me. And that's another method, actually, I would like to share is number 2 is find support. If you don't have support with your family, if you don't have support with your friends, which I really didn't, because they didn't get it. You know what I mean? They didn't and how could they? They didn't understand what I was going through. And so I had to reach out, and I went through a couple support groups. There was many that just wanted to complain about, this sucks and this is life and this is never going to get better. And I knew being in those types of groups wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to be. It was like, yes, this sucks, but how do I move forward? Right? That's the mindset shift, that you need to have, in understanding that I don't want to sit here and complain. I want to honor this and process it, but I also want to move forward. And how do I do that? And support groups, good support groups, ones that give you tools for whatever you're going through, can really help you, because I cannot explain to you how it feels to walk into a room of people that automatically understand what you're going through without you having to say a word. I can never accurately describe what that feels like, but it's something I wish everybody on the planet could experience, because it's life-changing. I felt like I had 100 pounds lifted off of me, finding people who I didn't have to explain anything to and just open their arms up to be my friend because they got it. So I can't say enough about support groups. I love them. I ran one for 3 years. They're a great tool. So please find a support group and keep looking if you haven't found one. I had to go through a few before I found one that I really connected with. Another thing that you can really do that's super powerful during grief is journaling. I know journaling for everybody is not their thing. Some people are like, yeah, I'm never going to journal. I don't like to write. And what I would say is then do voice memos. If you have a moment where you're really feeling something, most people have a phone and there's voice memos on there. Just hit record and just let it out, because that's what journaling does. It lets it out. If you like to write, fantastic. I like to write, so I would journal. But I'd also do voice memos, because sometimes I didn't have a journal, or sometimes I was taking a walk and I needed something to be released. And so I would just hit a voice memo and just record it. Nobody has to hear it. Nobody has to read it. This is just for you. It's just for personal use. And it's really to help you process those emotions, to get them out. I understand we don't like feeling these emotions. That's why everybody struggles with grief. We don't like feeling sad. We don't like feeling angry. We don't like feeling all the yuck. But like I used to tell my support group, we want to walk down Sad Street. We don't want to set up shop there. And they used to laugh, but it was a good metaphor for them to understand that. You also can't avoid it, because then the emotions just get pushed down, they don't get processed, and they will come out later. I can't tell you how many clients I've had that have dealt with trauma or been working with something really heavy, and 8 years later since the trauma, or 11 years later, and are still crying, and they're like, I don't understand why I can't get to happy. And I said, because you never process the grief. You can't skip it. You can't skip processing the grief to get to happy. It doesn't work that way. You don't need to soak in it over and over and over and over again, but you do have to process it. Like I said, you want to walk down Sad Street. You don't want to set up shop there. So once you do that and you process these emotions, you'll find that they change. And like for me, even with my brain injury, I don't cry over it. In fact, I consider it one of the greatest blessings of my life. But I allowed myself to process the grief that went through it. So knowing that and having the tools I have for grief helps me to process grief that I have in other areas of my life, because I know that these tools can be used for anything. So journaling, right? Great tool. Another great tool that I became certified in because I strongly, strongly believe in it is mindfulness. I know you've probably heard this a lot. You might not even understand what it means. Mindfulness is just being super attentive to the now moment. So I'll give you a quick example of mindfulness that's really easy to get started that I've used with my clients, my support group. Everybody showers, right? Start using mindfulness with activities that you already do that you enjoy or that you know about. So for showering, you would check in with yourself before the shower and go, how am I feeling? Right? Just take mental note and then get in the shower. And what you want to do is pay attention to how warm the water is. What does the water feel like? What does the tile feel like under your feet? How does the soap feel? What do the suds on your head feel like? What does the sound of the water running out of the faucet and down the drain sound like? It's being super, super mindful of that moment, not thinking about, okay, once I shower, I get out, I gotta call this person, I gotta get to work. You're not thinking about that. All you're thinking about is everything that's happening in that shower, in that moment, and being super mindful of it. And if it's not showering, I've had people that love to do the dishes. That's another great one, right? What does the soap feel on your hands? How does the sponge feel in your hands? What does the dish feel like? How hot's the water? That's mindfulness. And how that helps you in grief is it focuses you on just this moment. You're not thinking about all the memories and all the things, or why did this happen? You're not thinking about all that because you need a break from grief. You need a break. And mindfulness can offer you this beacon of calm in a moment of chaos. And you might, you take a shower for how long? Some people I know take longer showers, but 10, 20 minutes, that gives you a break from your grief. And you need that. You need it because you can't be grief all the time. It'll get to you. And I know we all deal with grief differently. And that's okay. There's no one right or wrong way. All I'm trying to do is give you ideas of how to navigate it so it isn't such a difficult journey or it isn't all consuming. And the other part I would add to the journaling is gratitude. And I know you've probably heard me talk about this to nausea, but when I was in my darkest time, like I shared with you, I forced myself every morning to write a gratitude list. And I did that because I knew I couldn't be grateful and sad at the same time. And I needed a break from my grief. So some days it was as simple as, I'm just glad I woke up. I'm glad I'm breathing. That's it. It didn't have to be this epic thing, but it got better and better and it helped me. And there was plenty of days I didn't want to do it, which I've shared with you guys before if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, but I forced myself because I know I needed that balance and break from grief. And we all need that. So find things that balance your grief, that bring you joy. You can have joy. You can be happy and still be grieving. Meaning you can have moments of happiness and still honor your grief. And a lot of people don't think that. Somehow they feel like they're betraying their grief if they have just a moment of happiness. The other thing I would suggest you guys doing is breath work. I like to take a breath of count of 4 in and a count of 8 out to naturally regulate my brain. So you just simply sit. You could be doing it standing in the grocery store. And you breathe in, counting to 4. You breathe out, counting to 8. And the reason for that is the longer your out breath needs to be longer than your in breath. It actually automatically will help your brain regulate and come down. So that's also a great breathing exercise for anxiety. So that's just a short little side note on breath work. There's a lot out there, and there's plenty more that I'm sure you could use that would help you. And the other thing I would say is another great tool is honoring memories. You know, what were the good times that you had? What was the laughter? What was the fun? What was the one thing nobody knew that this person brought to your life? It can bring you comfort, and it can bring you solace. And again, it's those moments of happiness within your grief. It's finding the gift within the shadow, as we like to say when we work with Gene Keys. And grief really, you know, it is the ultimate shadow, and we're all going to face it. So honoring a memory is a moment of happiness, and that might be even on your gratitude list. I'm grateful that I got to share these, 52 years with this person as a friend, or however long you've known them. I understand that grief may feel like it's insurmountable mountain. Trust me, I know, I've been there, and that's what I felt like. But what I learned in that moment was this mountain can transform our lives in such profound ways. And that was not something I ever expected. I really felt like I'm never getting through this. And I'm talking about after my brain injury of learning to adapt and be the person I became. I don't know how to fit into society. I don't know who I am anymore. I just thought there's just no way I'm ever going to get through this. But what I did was concentrate on the next right step. That's all I could do. It was, what was the next right step I can do? And then what's the next right step after that? And yes, to my therapist's point, I was living in survival mode, but that's all I knew to do. And there was a time that didn't work anymore. But that's when I found her. And what I would say is, I look back and go, that mountain transformed me. That mountain taught me to appreciate life in a whole new way. It taught me how to love myself in a whole new way. It taught me what it's like to really feel like a misfit in society and still learn to thrive when everyone around you doesn't get it or leaves. It taught me what my inner strength was. It taught me self-empowerment. It taught me courage, and it taught me compassion, not only for everybody else, but for myself. It taught me that judgment has no room, and that all I could do was love myself through this, no matter what was going to be on the other side. Judgment was just adding suffering to an already difficult situation. And I learned to alchemize those things and transform them. I learned to lean into my spirituality, my belief, and surround myself with people who supported me, even if I didn't know them, even if they were strangers. It also taught me how to be a good receiver and ask for help and accept the help without feeling like I owe someone or something, because I couldn't give anybody anything. So how does this all tie in? It all ties in this. As I draw this episode to a close, I want to leave you with a few words of encouragement. And those are understanding that pain is always going to happen. We all are going to feel it in one way, shape, or form, whether it's a heartbreak, whether it's a loss, whether it's an injury. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's not one of us on this planet who won't feel pain. But you don't need to suffer on top of the pain. And that's an important distinction, because a lot of us add suffering to an already painful situation, and we don't have to. And you don't deserve it. You do deserve love and compassion from yourself, now more than any other time if you're grieving. So remember that. I ask myself often, am I adding suffering to an already painful situation? And if my answer is yes, then how can I shift that into being more loving? To myself, first and foremost, and then to others. You can get through the tough times. I promise you, you can. You are stronger than you think, and you are more capable than anyone has ever told you. And if no one has ever told you, let me be the first to share and tell you that you are. You are strong. You are amazing. You are compassionate. You are capable. And it's okay to feel like you're not. You don't have to feel those things to necessarily be those things. That's what the mountain taught me. Just take the next right step. Just do the one small thing today for you. And as you go down this journey of grief, I promise you, it will get easier and easier and lighter until all that's left is love. Thank you guys for supporting me, for supporting this podcast, for sharing it, for liking it. Please leave your comments down below. If you're grieving right now, I would love to send you some love and care and support. So as always, stay curious, stay empowered, and keep shining your unique light. Love you guys.